Theresa May launched a humiliating Brexit climb down yesterday moan over plans to seize so-called Henry VIII powers. The Prime Minister caved into MPs' demands that a committee should be set up to examine statutory instruments, tools critics say lets the government dodge scrutiny, made under her flagship Brexit Bill. She had hoped to drive through plans in the EU Withdrawal Bill. But, faced with the prospect of an embarrassing Commons defeat on Wednesday over an amendment to the bill, she decided to back down. Her spokesman said the statutory instruments would be scrutinized by a sifting committee. He added, "We have studied the Procedures Committee report in detail and listened to the recommendations, and we are announcing today that we will be accepting this amendment. We recognize the role of Parliament in scrutinizing the bill, and we have been clear throughout that we are taking a pragmatic approach to what we have always said is a vital piece of legislation. Where MPs and peers can improve the bill, we will work with them." Note 10 paved the way for further U-turns, adding, "We have said we will look at amendments and respond to them in due course." The row surrounds 800 to 1,000 secondary laws that will give the government sweeping powers to implement Britain's withdrawal and correct EU-inspired law before March 2019. Critics say the so-called Henry VIII powers will allow the government to change the law of the land without scrutiny. So Parliament's Procedure Committee, led by Tory Charles Walker, demanded a new body to sift through all the secondary laws. Today, the government caved in and accepted its demands. The so-called sifting committee will decide if each law should be affirmative or negative. Affirmative powers must be debated by MPs before they become law, yet negative powers become law before MPs get to look at them. Negative powers can only be blocked if MPs vote to pray against them within 40 days, and the last time this happened was in 1979. The government had planned for most powers relating to EU law to be negative. Instead, each law will now have to be laid before the committee for 2 weeks, 10 parliamentary days, to decide if they should be upgraded to affirmative. Tory ministers will be able to ignore the committee's advice, but would be forced to explain why. Meanwhile, the power balance on the crucial body could spark a major political row. Officials today said they expected it to feature 16 MPs, 8 Tories, 6 from Labour and 2 from the SNP. That would leave the control of the committee on a knife edge, because whichever party provides the chair could effectively lose out on a majority. Meanwhile, some MPs may argue laws are still being made without enough scrutiny. Even affirmative powers are usually discussed in an obscure committee, and do not get a yes or no vote unless they are upgraded to a debate in the Commons chamber. The new sifting committee is also not permanent, it will only apply to the scope of the EU Withdrawal Bill. Since Theresa May launched her Brexit repeal bill, there's been furious debate about Henry VIII powers. So what are they? It's all to do with the difference between what us geeks call primary and secondary legislation. Primary laws are acts of Parliament and go through a long, line-by-line process of approval by MPs and the House of Lords. But with secondary laws, it's take it or leave it. There's no chance to edit them, and in some cases, when they go through the negative procedure, they actually become law before MPs get to challenge them. The last time one of these was blocked was 1979. These big differences mean primary laws are much more powerful. Quite rightly, some secondary laws can be crushed by the courts, primary laws can't. Yet a Henry VIII power lets the PM make a secondary law that edits a primary law. The process gets its name from the six-wife Tudor king who ruled by proclamation thanks to the 1539 Statute of Proclamations. The government claims it needs the power, which ends on March 29, 2021, to correct deficiencies in EU-inspired law after Brexit. It can't be used to change taxes or criminal offences, make laws retrospectively or change the Human Rights Act. But even Tory MPs and a House of Lords committee have voiced fears about the powers. Labour's Keir Starmer said, "So much for taking back control." Click here for our full guide to the repeal bill.